Steve here from Steve's Workshop. Today, I'm going to be making a series of videos on sign carving, just kind of generalising things a little bit, because the internet, the YouTube, and wherever you look for your videos can get a bit mind-boggling. And to me, nobody says the basics of it, of what you need, what you don't need in essence. And I'm just going to go through a few things that I personally use to get what I need out of my signs. I don't use expensive equipment. I don't use expensive bits. I like to find myself using alternative methods. If I can think of a way to do the same job as what someone else is doing, but not having to spend hundreds of pounds on just a router bit, then I'll try. So I was going to share a few things like that with you today. Now, sign carving, it's becoming popular, but you've got to mark it right. Now, what I mean by that is, I've made stuff like this. Now, this took me about 40 minutes to do. That's with the painting. Obviously a bit longer for the paint to dry and everything like that. Now, these weren't done with expensive bits. Now, I have bought bits from America when I first started sign writing. I bought it from Dave Signs. Now, a lot of you have probably heard of that and probably follow that. Now, he's an amazing sign maker, but he's done it for a lot of years, and then his dad's done it for a lot of years. So if there's anything particular you need to know, I've no doubt in my mind that Dave Signs will have the video that you require. So, saying that, I'll get on. Now, the bits that I did buy from Dave, the problem is with the bits, the fantastic bits, and I loved carving with them. The problem I had with them was the fact that to get them into this country from there, it cost me just shy, with the bits and the postage and packaging plus the custom charges, about just shy of £100. Now, I've only bought 3 bits. Now, the bits that I did buy was a 60-degree bit, a 90-degree bit, and a profiling bit. Now, to me, once I roughly did about 10 to 12 signs, they started going a bit dull. Now, I'm no machinist, so I can't sharpen these bits. Now, if I lived in America, I could have sent them back to Dave's, and they'd have charged them for a couple of dollars. He'd have regrinded them for a couple of dollars, which to me is brilliant. But as I live in the UK, it's not as straightforward. For me, it could cost me 50, 60 quid to send them back to him and then lose out for, I won't have any bits for say 2 to 3 weeks to 4 weeks. Then I've got to pay for postage to come back. So it didn't work out very economical for me. So what I did is I tried searching around and trying different bits that I found could do the same job. Not as easy, but not as hard. So the bits I did get from Dave, like I said, is, just get some white paper, and on my desk is falling to bits, is that there is the profile bit. Now, that is what you go round all the stenciling with. You go around all the lettering to initially start it. When you get to the patterns, you go round all of the outline of the image. Then what you do is, once you've done that, you can move to what they call the 90 or the 60-degree bit, whichever you want. They both do the same thing. But I prefer to go do my background. The background, what I mean by the background is, the background has got, I don't know if you can see that, it's got a texture in it. Now, that's because I've routed a little bit deeper than the profiling. Now, when you do that, you allow for the markings to be put in it automatically. That way, when you sand the top of, when you spray it all black, you sand the top of it back to wood. And it doesn't take the black out of the inset letters. It doesn't take it out of, I keep moving my hand to that side because I'm watching the screen, but it doesn't take it out of the profile of the image, because the image is set lower than the top of the board. I'm sure you'll catch my drift. So the other bits that I buy from him was the 60 degree and the 90 degree. Now, 1 minute. Sorry about that. There you go. Right. That then is just a 60-degree bit. And what that does is, when you go down into the wood, I'm just trying to give you a better angle here, and it's turning on, you're moving the router to kind of get rid of the waste inside, what you don't want, but it does leave a textured finish. Now that texture depends on the 90 or the 60-degree bit. Now what I found was, like I said, after 10 to 12, 15 signs, they were going blunt. And like I said, it cost me £100 to get these over here, basically. And for me to get them back for him to sharpen, I just didn't see the profit in it. There was no point. I'd be wasting all my money shipping bits around the world, basically. So I remember watching a YouTube video, and they were on about CNC bits, and I thought to myself, well, how come I can't use them in my signs? Now, what I mean by the CNC bits is they're a lot smaller, and I'll compare the difference. As you can tell, these are the CNC bits. Now, they are very, very small, very sharp points, to opposed to that. Now, you can get these CNC bits in a variety of chamfers. Now, I like to use, for the outline, for the profiling of all the letters and all the images, I like to use a 30-degree bit because it's got more of a point on. Now, there is some instances that I can use the 60-degree in the CNC bit. Now, the 60-degree bits are just a little bit wider, but I also have the 90-degree bits and I have the 25-degree bits for intricate work. But I found these CNC bits run really well through timber. Now, bearing in mind, if you were going through oak, then it's a bit different because oak is a very solid wood. I'm using stock pine basically to do my boards, or I tend to use the decking boards that I've got. Like on the back of this, you'll notice it's been dipped. It's been pressure treated. But what I do is I blast the top off it, which gives me that effect. The colouring, there's no colouring on this board whatsoever. That is the natural colour of the wood. And I think it looks absolutely brilliant. So I try and keep that as much as I can. I like the features it creates. I keep pointing to that side because I can see it there, but it's on the opposite side on the camera. These things here, you still leave like knots and everything like that. And I kind of like that. So basically what we're going to do is, I've just gone through the CNC bits. Now, opposed to these ones from America, these cost me £100 for 3. Now, the CNC bits, I get 10 30-degree bits for £10. That's £1 a bit. Sometimes I can get these for £7 for 10. And it's the same with the 60 degrees and the 90 degrees and the 25 degrees. So in all, if I went round that road, I'd probably talking roundabouts, I can get about 50 bits, 50 CNC bits of different varied degrees for about £45 to £50 with free delivery. So it makes sense really, because then I'm not bothered if one of these breaks or goes blunt. I can just bin it because I've barely paid out for it anyway. But what bit me was the fact that when I used them, although they were fantastic and they were brilliant at what they did, and I didn't have any problems with them at all, it's that when they start going a bit blunt, and it's pretty quick to tell you the truth, but it all depends on what timber you're using. But like I said, 10 to 12 to 15 signs later, I felt it pull on the router. Now, the routers are different. You get different strengths in routers. So if I were you, I will go through them in a minute. But as it's for the bits, I think there's no reason to get these bits unless you live over in America, Canada, because it's pretty cheap to ship over there for them between each other, just like it is for us to ship between us and say me who lives over in Yorkshire to somewhere down Devon, it's relatively cheap, but it's not cheap for me to ship 3 bits over to America, to the other side of the world basically, just to get them sharpened for them to be shipped back. I might as well just buy another 100 set, but then 12 signs later to 15, I'm going to buy some more. So that's why I moved to the CNC bits, and I'm pretty chuffed with them actually. Now, when it comes to the routers, you can watch a lot of American sites, and they're all using DeWalt's. Now, I've got a DeWalt, but I don't use the big DeWalt's that they're using for it. I use the trimmer routers. Now, the trimmer routers that I've got, I use a variety of them really. Some cheap ones, some things. So you don't need to go over the tops because they do the same job. They just take a little bit more time. You've just to allow it to cut the wood. You can't just pull it. The same with any machine really. But the DeWalt's tend to, the bigger the DeWalt, they tend to just eat the wood, which is what you want really, because then you're not spending 3 hours on a sign, what opposed to using a DeWalt, and it takes about half an hour to 40 minutes to do a sign. Now, what you'll find is I use stuff like these here, the Anastar. Now, these routers, I've got a couple of them. I started off with a Zen one. I started off with Zen. It's just a trim route. It's just a trim router. That's all, and it's just a thin thing. But it worked. It did everything, and I made a lot of money on the signs that I made because it just went and went. I mean, it's still going now. But what I did is I saved the money that I earned from the signs. It might not be a lot to start with, but I saved it up and I bought myself a DeWalt. Now, the reason I went for the DeWalt, it's still a trim router. Now, these ran in at about £32 each for this and the Zen one. So they're not really expensive equipment, but they did a really good job. Now, the DeWalt one, it's the D65510. Now, it is a trim router. It's just a trim, no different to the others, but it's DeWalt, but it's a better power motor, and I like the adjustments on this one, where you just flick that, and then you just turn that a little bit, and it just rises and falls. And that's what I wanted, because sometimes when you're carving, you might go through the work, you think, oh, it's a little bit too deep, and it's just a flick of the thing, and just turn it, it's done. Plus, if I want the base off, it's just the same, I pull 2 things, and it's off. And then you just slip it back on, like that, and it's done. That's all it takes. That's all it takes to change it. Now, the problem I had with the other ones is the fact that they have this mechanism on them. Now, they're only £32, so you don't expect a lot. But for ease, I did use one of these. I used it for a very long time, like I said. But the problem I had was this. Now, when you want to change the depth, there's a little thing on it, you turn it, but sometimes it goes too far and then your router drops, and then you have to start, and it's a lot of messing around basically, but you still can do the same job, just take your time. So my recommendation is to go and get a DeWalt trim router. Now, I do use one of these for background purposes only. Now, it's actually this one with the clear perspex base. I use this one for the fact that because I can keep it set. I can just set the depth, what I need from the top of the blade. I just set the depth, tighten it up, and I leave it. I just leave it set like that because I know I'm always going to go at that depth, always, for background. I don't need to alter it at all. So that's why I still use one of these for background work. Now, when I'm talking about the DeWalt's and everything like that, is the DeWalt that I've got were about, I paid £150 for it because there were a guy who was selling it cheap because he was moving to a flat and he didn't really want to do his signs no more because his neighbours above and bottom of him he didn't really want to push that. So he sold me that. Now, he sold me that, and the reason why it was £150 because they're only about £160, £170. Now, the only reason I paid that for it was A, because it was brand new. He only had it a couple of weeks. I still got everything with it, but he also gave me all the Dremel equipment that went through, all the router tables. So I got like a job a lot basically. Now they are out there, you've just to look for them. But if not, you don't need to buy all that stuff, because I don't really use the Dremel. I wanted that, but I just got, for the same price I'd have bought that brand new for off the internet or eBay or something like that. I got everything with it. Now, ever since I used the DeWalt, I found the carving is so much easier. I'm not fighting with the router to keep it in position. The router is powerful enough that if I just pull it a little bit, it'll cut the wood in front of it. The problem I had with the Zens and the other £30 one is when you're pulling the wood, you've got to go that slow that your signs can take a long time. And you lose a bit of heart in a sense where I can use my router and I can start with all the pattern. I can get all that perfect with that Zen router, with the little green ones, the £32 ones. I can get it perfect. I'll do all this perfect, but as soon as I get to this letter, it'll mess up because I've spent so long on it, which you could be talking an hour to an hour and a half, because it's such a small router in a sense. It's a small motor, it's only a cheap one, that as soon as you get to here and it messes up, you have to do the whole thing again. So after you've done that a couple of times, not only are you wasting your wood, but you're wasting your time, and you lose heart. And the problem is, once you lose heart, is you don't want to do it again. I found myself not wanting to make them, so I was forcing myself to do the signs, which I knew I could do. Now, since I got the DeWalt, I'm making signs left, right and centre, because as soon as you put that DeWalt to wood, all that DeWalt wants to do is go through it. Now, it will not go as fast as, it'll only go as fast as you pull it, obviously. But you tend not to have a router wander. If you buy a cheap router, what happens is, because the motors aren't powerful enough, it's spinning at maximum and it's screaming its little head off, because they are trim routers, the laminate trimmings for trim. So what happens is, as you're pulling it through, it's trying to cut it, but it only has to hit a tough piece of wood, whether it be a knot in pine, or just if you cut in mahogany or you cut in oak, it's a tough timber. And as soon as it hits something, because the router A is not heavy enough on the top end to keep the weight down, you're grabbing that router like that, and because you're tensed up, as soon as it hits something, you think that you're keeping it in line. You're not. The router will always go where it wants to go. As soon as it hits something hard, like a knot, it could be a little bit of a knot in it, a little tiny speckle of it, it will do that. It will just jerk out of your hands, and there's nothing you can do about it. Your piece of work is ruined, and then you lose heart in it. Now, the router for 150, 160, 170 pound is not an expensive router. You don't need one at 250, 300, 400 pound. You can use the 160 one. You can use the 30 pound ones. But the problem that you've got is, if you're new at carving and you're just learning the fact that you do want to carve, but we all make mistakes. They're hand carved. You can never get them perfect. They're not CNC machined. That's the beauty about these machines. These hand carved ones, they've got some personal touch to them. They was made personally. You know, they weren't made in bulk. One sign will never be the same as the next sign. Even if I made 100 of these, they will not be the same, because one line doesn't, when you're pulling that router, it won't follow the exact same line that was on the previous lump of wood you've just cut. So they're never the same. You will find a flaw in them all. So if you're going to start sign carving into wood, it's worth spending that little bit more instead of the £30 ones, and just getting yourself an 150 to 160 to 170 pound router, because then the enjoyment you'll get out of it when you're carving a piece of wood will work. It's a bit like someone once said to me, I keep messing up on my router and on my letters. That's fine. So all I say is, if you've got a length of wood, obviously a little bit bigger than that, and you put on that from A right through to Z, and then you decide, then you got your router and put your CNC bit in, your little 30 degree or your 60 degree, or even if you did buy the bits from America, that's fine. Whatever bit you put in it, if you start at A and you start carving it slowly, about time you've got to Z, and you look from A to Z, you'll see how you've improved. Now the problem is if your improvement can come a lot quicker if you buy the £160 routers, the £170 routers, opposed to the £30 ones. Now they're great for background because all the edging's done. You know, it's just the internal part of it, so it doesn't really make a difference what, unless you're taking half-inch of thing out, then you can't half-inch of timber out of a centre to get the background. You want it really deep at half-inch, then you'd have to go for a bigger router. You've got no choice because of the power you need to get through that wood. But as for a quarter of an inch, it's absolutely fine. But for you to get the enjoyment out, to notice that difference, the last thing you want to do is start at A and get to Z and it's still the same. Sometimes that's not you who's doing that. You have improved. You've got the stability of the router under control. You know how to control the bit. You know what speed the router's going at, so you can follow that line. That's all we're doing. We're just following lines. But the art is to keep it on the line, to get it as perfect, near as damn it as a CNC machine you can. But remember, they are hand carved. Now, if you add an expensive router, say £160, to opposed to the £30 ones, what you will see a difference, a massive difference, when you've started at A and you've gone to Z, because you've got a lot of letters there that you're going to improve on all the time. And when you mess up on the say B, you know when you get to C, you know what error you made on B, whether you've wandered off the line, so you know on C you're going to come back to the line, and that's how it works. You router anything. The only way to learn how to carve signs or how to use a router is to keep routering. If you don't keep routering, you will put it down for weeks, and then when you go back to it, it's not like falling off a bike. You can fall off a bike and then not go on it for 2 years, but we all know how to get on a bike. We're instantly going to do it, because as we get older, the balance gets better anyway. But with a router, it's completely different. You've got to get used to the pull on the router, the way it glides through the wood. Different woods take different strengths. Some, like pine, soft pine, you can just hold the two things on the back and then just pull the router forward and it'll follow the line wherever you want it to go, providing you keep it on the line. But say oak, for instance, it tends to have a wander. But the cheaper router, like I said, the cheaper routers do wander off. Now, it's up to you what you go for, but the basic essentials that you need are basically a router. Now, I'd rather spend, opposed to paying the £100 for the machine bits from America, I went for the CNC bits. Now, you don't even need to get all them that I got, it's just I do sometimes delicate work, but I've been doing it a long time. Now, what I've found is you could just go out and get yourself 30-degree bits and 60-degree bits, and they'll do the exact same things that I'm doing. So you're probably talking £20 in bits, but you get 20 bits because you get 10 in a pack. And you probably can get them for £14 because they could be £7 each. And that's why I like the CNCs. I'm not bothered if they snap. I'm not bothered if they're dull. I'm not going to waste my time sharpening them and taking them somewhere to be sharpened. I'm not going to be disheartened. I'll just take it off and throw it in the bin, because I know for £7 I can go get another 10. Now, so you're talking, what, £14 for CNC bits. Now, I use the 30 degrees. You can use the 30s and the 60s. They're fine. If you want to do intricate work, really fine work, where you really need that point, you can go for the 25-degree bit. And it is a longer point, and it will allow you to get intricate. But as for starters, a bit like I was, I just drew some letters on a board and just started carving it. I weren't bothered what bit, but as I got into it, I realised that maybe it's the bits that are at fault, and I found it wasn't. It was the router. The router were £30, and I found that all my effort were going into a router that I was trying. It was kind of controlling me. I weren't controlling the router. So my advice is, if you can afford it, you go for a DeWalt, something that costs about £160. Now this is the D65510. Now, you can get these relatively cheap. You can pick them up second hand. As long as they work, it doesn't make a difference what you use. So if you used one of them, then at least you're going to have more success in your signs that you're doing. Now, to do these signs, there's a variety of different ways of doing them. Now, for this scalloping on the top end of that, you'll notice that it's just like beveled all over, all the way down. Now, how I created that was with what we call a round over bit. So the round over bit, it goes into the wood a bit like that. I'm just trying to get a better angle here. It goes into the wood like that. And it cuts directly in. And then you just pull the router back out. So basically you grab the router and you pull it into your wood and out. Then move over, pull it in and out. It's pretty straightforward. I'm still under that thing where I can't still do it through frame of mind. I have to put markings on the board to where, like a line of where I know the router has to hit bang on to get the perfect lines in the timber. Now that's just the way I like to do it because I like drawing on stuff. But as you get better, you don't need them. If you watch somebody like Dave Sines, he grabs it and he does this because he's done it for so many years, 40 odd years. And then his dad's done it for such a long time. So combine that age of knowledge they've got, they can just do it with their eyes shut. But these bits, these round over bits, it doesn't matter how deep you do it. You don't need to do it to the depth I do it. A bit like this is the sign that I'm going to be doing videos on, and just to show people that you can carve with CNC bits and still bring out amazing signs. Now, the scalloping that I did on this one, this is a template that I'm doing now for somebody. Let me just put it in angle. So as you can see, it's just always with us. It's just a free text that I got off online. I found the text and the angel. It's not I just cut them all out. But as you can tell on the scalloping, as you can tell, it's created a better pattern, which has created the nice shapes in the timber. But it's about if you watch a YouTube video, a bit like myself when I first started, I watched them and I did it exactly like them. I never experimented with anything really because I thought, well, I like that look. A bit like the scalloping on this one. I like the look. I think it looks effective when it's in. And it matches everything that we've got here. All the colouring's right, the edge of the board's right. It just looks so effective. It's just hard work when the camera's on the opposite way around. It just looks effective on the edges. Instead of it just being a square piece of wood, say, being that side, you've just got the square edges. It just adds a bit of character, that's all. But you've got to learn to experiment. That comes in time once you've grown confidence with the router bits, how the router pulls. Like if you, like going back to the routers, if I set the router up now for the Zen, which is the green one, let's say this one, that I have to do more work in keeping that straight in a line of following a curve and everything than I do, say, with the DeWalt. Because the DeWalt's a bit more robust and a bit more powerful, so when you pull it through, it will go through. So routering is, it's a hobby. You've got to have the passion for it. But if you've got a machine that won't do it as efficiently as you want, you'll be thinking you're at fault, and you're not at fault. The only way to get better at routering is to keep routering. But if you've got a machine that keeps making mistakes, it's not you who's making the mistake, unless you're deliberately pulling it out of the way. But if you're following a line and the router does that, you get that with everything. But you have less chance of it. You have more success rate if you've got a bit more quality router, because it'll just eat its way through it instead of going round it, basically. But this sign here is what I'm going to be carving, and I will do videos on it. Now, I'll be carving all the letters inset and the angel inset at the top. Now, that is going to be, it's going to be a really nice sign, but I'm only using CNC bits for it. I'm not using really, really expensive bits. I can do this with that. But it's about adapting what you want. You're wanting out with your signs. Now, there will be a number of videos coming up. This is my first video, so I'm sorry if I've made a mess of it, and it's hard to follow. But I'm just trying to give you the basics that you don't really need to buy expensive bits to start with. You can start with a £30 router and £7 bits, and print yourself out a thing from the internet, or if you go into Word, you write a letter, you write your name on the one word, or PowerPoint, blow it up to what size you want, and then print it out and stick it onto a piece of wood. Cut it out with a £7 bit, but at least you're giving it a go, and you're not out of pocket in a sense, because you can use scrap wood that's lying around. I have an habit of collecting bed slats, the wooden slats that go across the bed. I have an habit of collecting them because I know that I can router a name into it. Yes, the plaque's only so wide, but it's, you know, it's 4 foot long or 3 foot long. However size, if I get them off 6 foot bed, it doesn't make a difference. But I know I can just mess around and put someone's name in it, and then just give them the plaque. It makes no difference. It costs you no, because you collect them bits of wood that are lying around. They're there for you to practice on, so you're not buying brand new timber and wrecking it, basically. So that's all that you need to really think about. You can start routering for next to nothing. As time goes on, you will have to consider, if you're getting to the point where you're getting from A and it's a mess, the letter, when you've gone round it, you'll notice on B that it looks the same, but it won't be. Then C, but by the time you've got to Z, you've got better. Now, if there's still flaws in Z, go do it again. It's on scrap wood. You're wanting to learn this routering, so take the time to learn it. The signs aren't going to carve perfectly because you want them to carve, because you've done the alphabet from A to Z. It's not, you might have to go through it, everybody's different, you might have to go through it 6 or 7 times, but then at the end of it, you might still have that fault where you're thinking, hang on, but I'm still not getting this. You are. It could be the router that you've got. It's not guiding, you're not guiding the router's guiding you. It's telling you where it's going. Because as soon as it's a tough patch, no matter how sharp your bit is, if the motor isn't powerful enough, you're going to lose that function of controllability on it, because it'll go round the hard bit in the wood, and then you have to pull it back to the line. By then your work's wrecked. It's firewood at the end of the day then. You can't fill it in and can't carve it again. It doesn't just grow back. So don't be disheartened when you've got to Z and it's still not right. If let's say you had a DeWalt router or any name really, I'd go for the DeWalts because they're more robust, you know, and the bases, I like the bases on them and everything like that. But the bases I've got are big Perspex ones. Now, there's a place in Birmingham that does these, but I used to make my own, like for these, I made my own Perspex base. It's just a bit of Perspex. Now you can get the template from the actual base itself, because they come with black bases on them, but you could just draw around that, and that'll give you the tightening holes for you to drill in. But these are the Perspex, so I could just hold it there. Instead of holding the router like that and guiding it through, I can hold the router like that and just pull it around where I want it. That's why I made that base. But when I got this router, the gentleman who I got it off already had the base with it. So it's just got a couple of handles on that you just hold and you just pull it around. And it's just better than just grabbing that and going along. Plus you're keeping your fingers out the way of any electrical things and that. But you've got more control over it because the router has got a longer base for it to sit on, say, the wood. You can slide it across. It's not going to tip or anything like that, but it's got some weight in it which helps weight the router down, because the motor will cut through the timber. So there is a number of things that you can do. Now, just to make it easier for yourself, but you can use the routers, the bigger routers with the handles on the side. That's absolutely fine. The only problem I found with them is I don't have that viewability inside the router. You only get a little hole where you have to put a spanner in and you can just see the router bit. Now, the problem I have with them is because I don't have the visibility, I can't see the line coming up. When I'm pulling the router, there's a line moving up in a sense, because you're doing this, you're bringing them closer to get the lines coming to the router. So you can't open them up anymore, but at least with these, they're opened up at the back to let the light and the extraction out, because we modified the back of the router bases. That the router bases are modified at the back. We cut all that out all that there is all cut out. Then on the front it's already cut out, it's manufactured like that. But then what happens is it not only lets all the dust out of it, but it lets light into it, which means the more light you can get in. Now the DeWalts, they do come with LEDs in the bottom anyway, so when you do switch them on, they are lit up anyway. So then we make the bases, perspex bases, so you can see all the bottom basically. So when you put it onto your wood, I can see everything through it, which is better for me, because then I can just concentrate on sending that round a bit through the wood, instead of having to constantly lift it up, have a look, put it back down. There's more mistakes, as you put it back down, you're going back into the same wood and it couldn't move over, and then your line's screwy. It's just not worth it, basically. So always try and create a router. Now there's a lot of people, if you don't know how to make them, there's YouTube videos what will show you how to make them. A lot of people aren't that way, but there's a lot of people like myself, you know, I made them myself because I know how to. So, but like I said, I didn't need to make one for the DeWalt because it already came with one basically. But there is a company in Birmingham that will make it. You tell him what router you've got and he'll make it for you. But sometimes it's worth giving it a go yourself. You get what you want. But it's not essential. You don't have to. You can hold the router like that. It's just if you're going to be making signs where you want to sell them or you want to make fancy signs, for more control you do need a router base the way this is. So there's not a lot really now that... One moment. That's the one. There's not a lot now that I can really say. To make signs, you can go either on the cheap option or the expensive one. If you want to go on the expensive one, that's fine. All I'm saying is you don't need to. You can go for £30 routers. The £7 router bits, the CNC bits. You can still get the same results. Just a little bit more time has got to be took to do it, that's all. But when you're doing something like this, you want it to be right anyway. You don't want to, if I had to do that sign and within 10 minutes I'd carved all lot, it wouldn't look nice to the naked eye. So when I sold that sign, I then went over to, and they said, oh no, I don't like that because the lines aren't crisp and clear. That's because of the router. You've rushed it to try and get a result. Sometimes if you go for the cheaper routers, that's what happens. You're thinking that I've got to rush it to get it through. You don't. It don't work that way. So that's all I can say to you really. I've gone through the router bits and everything you need to do sign carving. But it's up to you what you go for. Don't go for the expensive stuff. For less than, £50, you can start sign carving signs for less than £50, to opposed to £200 to £300.